Hello, and welcome to another cozy mystery on The Curious Case. I'm your host, Davis. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from tonight? And how was your day? If you'd like more quiet stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let the evening soften around you. Tonight, a ticking sound hid more than time. Miss Marple stepped off the small village bus and paused. Brindleford looked quiet, too quiet, not the usual stillness of a market morning. Something tighter, something held back. She noticed it at once. Ticking, a faint ticking, not one clock, many clocks, almost everywhere. Stalls lined the main street with clocks stacked in rows. Large clocks, small clocks, travel clocks, mantel clocks, all ticking at different speeds, all out of rhythm. Miss Marple frowned. A small hook tugged in her mind. Odd, she whispered. She spotted Mrs. Hargood waiting near the market gate. A kind woman, old friend, always cheerful. But today her posture was stiff. Her hands were clasped too tightly. No smile reached her eyes. "Jane," Mrs. Hargood said. A thin breath followed. "You came, thank goodness." Miss Marple took her arm. "What is it?" "I'll explain," Mrs. Hargood muttered. "People are unsettled. Since last night." She looked at the stalls again, then back to Miss Marple. "Everyone is selling clocks today. Everyone. It started at dawn." Miss Marple listened. The ticking filled every pause. It wasn't loud, just everywhere, and everyone moved quickly. No one lingered. No one laughed. Even greetings were short. Eyes flicked toward doorways, toward corners, toward shadows. A shop door nearby stood half open. A painted sign hung above it. Crispin and Sun Clock Repairs. Miss Marple leaned slightly to look inside. She saw no one, but she heard it. Tick, tick, tick. Slow, measured, too steady compared to the chaos outside. "Is Mr. Crispin inside?" she asked. Mrs. Hargood shook her head. "No, and that's the trouble. He wasn't home last night. His apprentice opened the shop, found it exactly like this." Miss Marple stepped closer. The door creaked. Not from wind, from neglect. Someone had left in a hurry. Someone had not returned. She entered the shop. Mrs. Hargood stayed behind but watched the doorway. Inside was simple. Tools, shelves, clock parts. Nothing out of place at first glance. But the air felt paused, as if a task had been interrupted mid-step. On the counter sat a sealed envelope. Thick paper, firm handwriting. 4 words on the front. "For the police only." Miss Marple touched the edge but did not lift it. She studied the counter instead. Dust lines. A clean circle where a clock had once rested. A faint scrape on the wood. Someone had moved quickly, too quickly to hide the marks. She looked toward the back door, still closed. No signs of breakage, no signs of struggle, just absence. And the ticking. Mrs. Hargood stepped in. She spoke softly. As soon as the envelope appeared, people stopped talking. No one wants to be the one to open it. Everyone fears what's inside. Miss Marple nodded. Logic tugged at her again. A missing man. A message left behind. A village filled with clocks. Not random, not harmless. A pattern. She could feel it forming. She glanced once more at the envelope, then at the empty chair behind the counter. The chair still slightly angled, as if someone had risen from it fast, very fast. And Miss Marple knew. She lowered her voice, almost a whisper. Someone had stepped away in fear. The bell above the shop door rattled as villagers pushed inside. Voices rose, then dropped again. People whispered instead of speaking. Eyes darted. Feet shifted. Everyone watched the counter. No one touched it. Miss Marple stood near the doorway. She stayed. Quiet, she observed. She waited for the right moment. Mrs. Hargood trembled beside her. Her hands shook. Her breath caught. She tried to steady herself, but failed. Miss Marple placed a light hand on her arm. Mrs. Hargood nodded once, but fear stayed in her eyes. The apprentice hovered near the workbench. Thin, pale, nervous, couldn't meet anyone's gaze. He clutched his sleeves, took small breaths, looked ready to bolt. A man stepped forward. "My boy found it," he said. The villagers turned to him. He gestured toward the counter. To him, it looked wrong. Mr. Crispin never leaves things out. Never. Miss Marple approached the counter slowly. The envelope still sat there, unmoved, untouched. Everyone kept distance from it. The apprentice swallowed. "It wasn't there last night," he said. "It was there this morning, right in the center." He pointed at the exact spot. His finger shook. Miss Marple spoke gently. "And you opened it?" He nodded. "Barely." "Yes. I thought Mr. Crispin had left me instructions. Or a note. But it wasn't that." A woman near the door crossed her arms. "He shouldn't have opened it," she muttered. "It said it was for the police." The apprentice shrank back. I know. But I was scared. He never leaves early. He never disappears. Not without telling me." "Minnie Hook." Miss Marple's voice stayed calm. "What did you find inside?" The apprentice hesitated. A long hesitation. His jaw tightened. His shoulders lifted. He finally reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small brass key. He placed it on the counter. Everyone stared. Miss Marple leaned in. Short, focused, careful. The key was simple. Plain, no label, no tag, just brass. A thin scratch curved across the side, almost a crescent shape. Miss Marple noted it. No one else seemed to see it. "Where was Mr. Crispin last night?" she asked. The villagers exchanged looks. "A few?" Shrugged. A few looked away. One man cleared his throat. "He locked up at 6, said he had one more job to finish. That's it. No one saw him after that." Miss Marple turned to the apprentice. "And you arrived this morning?" "Yes, 7 o'clock. Door was half open." He paused. "That never happens. Never." Miss Marple waited. Silence pushed through the room. Suspicion moved in small glances. Guilt hid in lowered heads. Someone in that room knew more. But no one spoke. "What about the back door?" Miss Marple asked. "Locked," the apprentice said. From the inside, his voice dropped, like he never left. "Minnie Hook." A woman near the shelves whispered, "This village hasn't seen trouble in years." Another whispered, "Trouble came last night." Miss Marple studied faces. She watched reactions, flinches, twitches. Breaths held too long. She returned her eyes to the brass key. Small, cold, unexplained. Something in the room was heavier than the missing man. Something unsaid, something shared, something no one dared to voice. Miss Marple felt it clearly. The tension wasn't about the key. The tension came from the silence around it. She straightened. The key wasn't the mystery. She looked at each villager, one by one. The silence was. Miss Marple lifted the brass key with 2 fingers. Light grip, steady hand, no rush. The villagers watched her. No one breathed fully. Everyone waited for her reaction. She gave them none. Not yet. She turned the key slowly. Once, then again. Her eyes narrowed. She saw it at once, a detail others missed, a detail that mattered. There was a thin scratch on the side. A curved scratch, a tiny crescent shape, Minnie Hook. Miss Marple tapped the scratch with her nail. "Interesting," she said. No one responded. Not a single word. She looked at the apprentice. He flinched. Just a small twitch, but clear. He looked at the floor, his shoes, anywhere but her eyes. He knew something. She saw it. "This isn't a house key," Miss Marple said. The villagers shifted, arms folded, hands tightened. Eyes flicked at one another. She held the key up. "It's a workshop master key." Now the room stiffened. A few whispers rose, then died. People didn't want to speak. They wanted someone else to speak. "This type of key," Miss Marple continued, "opens hidden compartments. Inside antique clocks. Old ones. Rare ones." Mrs. Hargood gasped quietly. The apprentice bit his lip. Miss Marple turned the key again. She watched the apprentice's shoulders tense. She watched him swallow. Hard. You've seen this scratch before, she said softly. It wasn't a question. It was an opening, a doorway for truth. But the apprentice froze. He shook his head, too quickly, too sharp. No, ma'am, he whispered. I haven't. Miss Marple studied him. No anger, no push, just observation. Human nature told her more than words. If Mr. Crispin left this for the police, she said, he believed someone would search for it. She let the sentence hang in the air. The room tightened again. She looked at the villagers now. Who knew Mr. Crispin worked with hidden compartments? Everyone avoided her gaze. Everyone. Every face turned away. A wall of silence. A practiced one. That was suspicious. Villagers always loved to talk. Except now. Except on this topic. Miss Marple moved her eyes from one person to the next. She watched how they stood, how they breathed, how they held their arms. Emotion cracked through the room. Worry, guilt, fear, something deeper, something tied to the key. Minnie hook. Miss Marple stepped toward the apprentice. He backed up, one step, then another. He almost hit the workbench. You know where this key belongs, she said. Quiet voice, firm tone. He closed his eyes for a second. A full second. Then he opened them fast. I don't, he said. Another lie. Clumsy, thin, easily spotted. Miss Marple placed the key back on the counter. She kept her hand on it for a moment. Not for emphasis, for understanding. Someone feared this key. Not because of metal, because of what was inside the clock it opened. She lifted her hand. This key unlocked something. She looked at the doorway. She felt the tension behind it. Someone feared it. Miss Marple left the clock shop with a plan. Rumors always settled at the same place first. The post office. In any village, nothing traveled faster than a whispered stamp counter secret. She walked in quietly. The clerk, Mr. Peabury, stood behind the counter, tall, thin, always alert. He pretended not to notice her at first. He always did that before sharing anything important. Miss Marple greeted him. Good morning, Mr. Peabury. He nodded once. Morning. A fast glance at the door. A slower one at her hands. He leaned forward a little, just enough to show he had something to say. Minnie hook. You're here about Mr. Crispin, he murmured. Miss Marple didn't answer. She waited. Silence was often the key to unlocking talkative people. He lowered his voice. People are frightened. He argued with a stranger last night. Miss Marple tilted her head. A stranger? Yes, tall man, dark coat. Didn't greet anyone, didn't buy anything, just walked straight to the shop and went inside. He paused. No one else was allowed in. Miss Marple absorbed that. Who saw the argument? 3 people. He folded a stack of envelopes. None of them agree on what they heard. Another glance at the door. Typical, isn't it? Miss Marple smiled slightly. Contradictions can be useful. He nodded. Then you'll like these. One person said Mr. Crispin shouted first. He tapped the counter. Another said the stranger shouted, tap, and a third said no one shouted at all. Miss Marple blinked once. 3 versions. Exactly. He leaned even closer. But there's more. A woman down the lane said she heard shouting after midnight. He paused for effect. She swears it came from the shop. Miss Marple pressed gently. And what do you think, Mr. Peabury? He shrugged. People hear what they fear. Minnie hook. But they also repeat what they hear. Miss Marple nodded. That was true. Especially here. Especially today. Mr. Peabury reached under the counter. He pulled out a small ledger. Crispin's name appeared on several pages. Late payments, he said quietly. Small ones. Nothing serious. He tapped one line. But this one worries me. Miss Marple looked closely. A note was scribbled beside it. 2 words. Old debt. She touched the ink gently. This was written recently. Last week, he confirmed. Crispin was uneasy. Said a debt had returned. He stiffened. That's what people are saying. A debt walked back into the village. Miss Marple repeated the phrase softly. A debt returned. Mr. Peabody nodded again, and now his voice dropped even lower. So did a name. Miss Marple looked at him. Just waited. No pressure. Patience again did the work. He swallowed. Hard. One person claims Mr. Crispin mentioned him. Another says he saw him near the bridge. A third says he left on the night train. He shook his head. No one agrees on anything, except the name. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Which name? Mr. Peabody didn't say it. He only mouthed it once. Soft. Shaken. Careful. Jonas Vale. A name from old troubles. A man with a reputation. A man Crispin never wanted to see again. Miss Marple felt the shift. The room tightened. Even the ticking from the clock in the corner seemed to slow. And the village whispered a name. She closed the ledger. Met Mr. Peabody's eyes. No one wanted to repeat. Mrs. Hargood walked home in silence. Miss Marple followed her. No questions. Not yet. She could see the tension in every step. Something heavy waited behind her door, something she had held back too long. Inside, Mrs. Hargood closed all the curtains. Her hands shook again. She held the edge of the table for balance. Miss Marple stood still. She let the woman settle. She knew the confession would come when fear loosened its grip. I should have told someone. Mrs. Hargood whispered. Her voice was thin, frayed, barely held together. Miss Marple waited, still silent, still steady. Mrs. Hargood opened a drawer, slow, careful, as if the object inside carried weight. She pulled out a small envelope, plain paper, folded twice, edges worn from being held. She offered it with trembling fingers. He gave me this, she said, 2 days ago. She took a sharp breath. Crispin. He asked me to keep it safe. Minnie Hook. Miss Marple accepted the envelope but didn't open it yet. Why you? She asked quietly. Because he trusted me, Mrs. Hargood said. A tear slid down her cheek. He said he felt watched. He didn't want the apprentice involved. He didn't trust the police. He only trusted me. Miss Marple nodded once. And you didn't read it? No. Her voice cracked. He told me not to unless something happened. And I didn't want to create trouble. People talk. People twist things. I didn't want a scandal. Her hands moved to her face. I thought he was just worried over nothing. Miss Marple opened the envelope gently. A single sheet of paper slid out. Neat handwriting. Clear lines. 3 items listed. Miss Marple read aloud. Clock 1, clock 2, clock 3. Next to each clock was a time. Not the same time. Not even close. Each one written with precision. She studied, to the numbers. They didn't match any normal schedule. Then she read the final line. A warning, short, direct, cold. If I disappear, look inside the 3rd. Miss Marple lowered the paper. Mrs. Hargood looked away, shame heavy in her posture. I didn't open it, she said. I kept it hidden. I thought it was some private worry. I thought it would pass. Miss Marple placed a gentle hand on her arm. It is not your fault, she said softly. But she also knew fear had cost time. Time that mattered. Did he say anything else? Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Hargood wiped her eyes. Yes. He said an old matter had returned. He didn't explain. He said he would deal with it. She shook her head slowly. But now I see it. He was afraid. Truly afraid. Miss Marple folded the letter again. 3 clocks. 3 times. A hidden compartment. A warning. A vanished man. It formed a shape. A pattern. A direction. But the damage was done. The delay had consequences. Mrs. Hargood sank into a chair. He trusted me to act, she whispered. I didn't. Tears finally spilled over. And now he's gone. Miss Marple stood. She held the letter firmly. The weight of it was clear, heavy, urgent. She kept the letter too long. Miss Marple looked toward the door. She felt the clock ticking in her mind. And now he was gone. Miss Marple returned to the shop. The apprentice stood alone near the workbench. His hands hovered over a pile of screws but didn't touch them. He looked unfocused, lost, afraid. She approached him slowly. He noticed her and straightened at once. Too fast, too eager, a boy trying to look calm when he wasn't. "May I see your wrist?" Miss Marple asked. Her tone was soft, gentle, direct. He froze, then inched his sleeve down. Not enough to hide anything, just enough to pretend. Miss Marple reached out and lifted the cuff slightly. The scratch was there. Thin, fresh, a metal cut. Not deep, but sharp, recent. She knew the type. Clock tools made that kind of mark. Mini hook. "You've been working on something," she said. He pulled his hand back. "No, just a small accident." He rubbed the scratch hard, as if erasing it. Nervous gesture, common in boys hiding truth. Miss Marple studied his face. Red around the eyes, short breaths. Avoided looking at the third clock in the corner. Every time she shifted toward it, he tensed. A slight flinch, barely noticeable. Human nature always whispered first. "You're frightened," she said softly. He stiffened. "I'm not. You are." Her voice stayed calm. "You fear someone. Not something. Someone." He swallowed. "No." Miss Marple stepped closer to the third clock. The apprentice took one step back. Not an accident, an instinct. A reaction tied to guilt or fear. She tapped the clock frame lightly. "What did you find in here?" she asked. He shook his head quickly. "Nothing. I didn't open it. I swear." Miss Marple tilted her head. "That is not what your wrist says." "Mini hook." He looked at the clock again, then at the front door, then at her, back and forth, as if calculating which direction was safer. Miss Marple recognized the pattern. She had seen it before, many years earlier. A young boy in street, Mary Mead, who tried to fix his father's watch. He had broken it, then lied, then broke it again, trying to hide the first break. Fear made him foolish. Guilt made him clumsy. Human nature had not changed since. "I once knew a child," Miss Marple said. "A clever child, but fear made his hands shake. He ruined every clock he touched." She looked directly at the apprentice. "Fear always shows itself. Always." His chin quivered, a small crack in his control. "You flinched when I mentioned the third clock," she said. "You flinched again just now. Another beat. You know what lies inside." He backed up so quickly he hit the stool behind him. It clattered. He jumped. A guilty boy would jump. An innocent one would simply move it aside. Miss Marple didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply watched him. Human nature revealed the rest. He glanced at the window, at the door, at the clock. Fear circled him like a tight rope. She stepped closer. One small step. Nothing threatening. Just presence. The apprentice lowered his head. His voice cracked. "I can't," he whispered. "He'll know." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Who?" He didn't answer. He only trembled. And the truth settled. He knew something, and feared someone. Miss Marple stepped behind the shop. The small yard was empty. Quiet. Still. She saw the shed at once. A narrow wooden door. A heavy padlock. Dust on the ground. Footprints pressed into it. She crouched, studied the prints. 2 sets. One lighter, one heavier. Différentes directions. One leading toward the shed. One leading away. Mini hook. She followed the trail toward the door. A torn piece of blue cloth hung on a nail. Fresh rip. Edges sharp. Someone had snagged it rushing through. She pocketed the cloth. Her eyes moved to the ground. A screwdriver lay half buried in dust. Dropped. Not placed. The handle was scratched. Thin metal marks. Someone used it recently. Likely to pry something open. Or closed. Miss Marple stood and tried the shed door. Locked, but not fully. The padlock hung at an angle. Someone had closed it in a hurry. She lifted it lightly. The shackle slid out, not locked at all, just hooked through. She pushed the door open. Inside, the air felt tight. Tools on shelves. Boxes stacked along the wall. Clock parts, loose gears, old frames. Everything arranged with Crispin's usual order, except for one section, The far wall. 3 antique clocks stood there, tall, wooden, heavy, their faces covered with a sheet. She lifted the sheet slowly. The first clock was silent, hands frozen, dust inside the glass. The second clock leaned slightly, a new screw at the base. Someone had opened it recently, closed it badly. The angle betrayed a rushed hand. The third clock stood upright, perfectly straight, polished, untouched at first glance. But the second she leaned in, she heard it. A soft tick, very soft, barely there, a ticking that didn't match the others. Minnie Hook. She placed her ear closer. Tick, 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 steady, quiet, purposeful. Someone had set this one ticking for a reason. She checked the edges, a faint tool mark around the keyhole. Fresh, shiny, a recent attempt to open it, or close it. Then she straightened. She scanned the shed again. A feeling pressed in her mind. Something off, something wrong. She turned slowly toward the open door. A shadow moved. Quick, sharp, human. Miss Marple stepped toward the doorway, but the figure was already gone. Only the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the yard. Fast, desperate. Someone fleeing. Someone who didn't want her near the third clock. She reached the doorway. Too late. The gate at the end of the yard swung for a second. Just a second. As if someone pushed through it with force. She walked to the gate, looked down the alley. Empty. Silent. But the dust told the truth. Fresh prints. Running prints. A direction leading away from the shed. Miss Marple held the side of the gate. The metal still shook. Recently disturbed. Recently held. Someone had been watching her. Someone who knew she would check the shed. Someone ready to bolt the moment she got close to the third clock. She tightened her grip on the torn blue cloth. Someone had been watching her. She turned back toward the ticking clock and fled. Inspector Graves arrived before noon. Firm steps, sharp eyes, no wasted movement. He greeted Miss Marple with a brief nod, then glanced around the shed. "Show me," he said. Miss Marple handed him the torn piece of blue cloth. He turned it over in his hand. Twice, then looked at her. "This came off a heavy coat," he said. "Wool, dark navy. Expensive, not local." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes, and the tear was fresh." Graves exhaled slowly. "I know whose coat this is." He held the cloth up to the light. "Jonas Vale. He was seen at the station 3 nights ago." Pause. "Some say he walked toward the village. Some say he argued with Crispin." "Minnie Hook," Miss Marple answered softly. Then the rumors were not wrong. Graves didn't respond. He stepped inside the shed, looked at everything. Twice. He crouched near the 3 clocks. Then he leaned close to the third one. "You heard it ticking?" he asked. "Yes," Miss Marple said. "And the others are silent." Graves opened his pocket knife. He scraped the edge of the clock frame gently. A thin curl of wood lifted. Fresh. Cut. Not aged. He examined the keyhole. Tool marks. New ones. "Someone forced this open," Graves said. "Not professionally. Quick, sloppy, someone in a hurry." Miss Marple nodded again, and someone shut it again just as fast. Graves tapped the base of the clock. Soil dusted onto his glove. He rubbed it with his thumb. "Riverbank soil," he said. "Not from this yard, not from the shop." He pointed at the ground. "Look here." Under the clock frame, faint traces of pale soil formed a tiny trail. Straight lines, drag marks, as if the clock had been carried from somewhere else. Then set here, Minnie Hook. "That means it was moved recently," Miss Marple said. Graves nodded. "Very recently." He rose and checked the floor again. Boot prints, large ones, deep heel marks. Not Crispin's. Not the apprentice's. A heavier man. Graves turned back to Miss Marple. "You saw someone run?" "Yes. Too fast to recognize." He looked. Grim. "Jonas Vale is taller than most men here. Broader. Wears heavy boots." He tapped the print with his pen. "Matches the weight. Matches the size." Miss Marple folded her hands. "So Crispin was not working alone last night?" "No," Graves said. "He was with someone." He reached for a notebook. "I need Crispin's financial ledger. The full one. Not the market list, not the shop repairs. He looked toward the shop door. I want the private book. Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. You believe this is about money? I believe everything is about money, Graves replied. And Crispin kept 2 sets of records. I've suspected that for years. He snapped his notebook shut. Miss Marple studied his expression. Determined, focused, already forming conclusions. But something else sat behind his eyes, the sense of a larger pattern, the shape of a plan. Graves stepped back and surveyed the shed again. The footprints, the soil, the clock, the cloth, the marks. He nodded once. This wasn't a missing man, he said. His voice dropped. This was preparation. Inspector Graves spread the notes across the counter. 2 names, 2 paths, both dangerous. Miss Marple stood beside him, quiet, alert, watching every detail fall into place. Let's start with Jonas Vale, Graves said. He tapped the first name. Heavy hand, firm tap, no hesitation. Old business partner, he continued. Worked with Crispin years ago. Repair jobs, private commissions, some legitimate, some not. He looked at Miss Marple. You know that type. She nodded. Human nature remained the same. People hid their worst dealings behind quiet trades. Clockmakers were no exception. Graves flipped the page. Money dispute. Serious. Another tap. He blamed Crispin for a failed job. Said Crispin owed him. Said he'd collect one day. Mini hook. Miss Marple repeated the phrase. One day arrived. Yes, Graves said. And he was seen in the village 3 times. Near the station, near the bridge, near the shop. He paused. Then he vanished again. Miss Marple leaned in. Opportunity? Plenty, Graves replied. He could force the shop open. Move the clocks. Take an item. Threaten Crispin. Drag him somewhere. Jonas fits all of it. He slid the paper aside. Now the apprentice. The tone shifted. Graves didn't tap this time. He held the page lightly, carefully, as if unsure. Nervous, he said. Too nervous. He pointed toward the back room. Fresh scratch on his wrist. Tools nearby. He knew about the clocks. He had access. He had time. Miss Marple added softly. And fear. A great deal of fear. Graves nodded. Too frightened for innocence. He tapped the page again. This is not the fear of a criminal. This is the fear of a boy caught between 2 dangers. Miss Marple thought for a moment. He could have opened the clock. He could have seen something, or heard something, but he isn't lying well. No, Graves said. He's hiding something, but not everything. Mini hook, Miss Marple asked. And his alibi? Graves exhaled. It broke. How? She asked. He claimed he was at home after midnight. Graves opened a small notebook. But a neighbor saw him leaving the shop at dawn. He told me he arrived at 7. He closed the book. He lied. Miss Marple didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, she reordered the pieces. The apprentice lied about time. Jonas lied about presence. Both connected to the clocks. Both had reason to be near Crispin. But one lie felt heavier. One felt forced. One felt panicked. Miss Marple looked at the shed door. She remembered the running footsteps. Heavy. Fast. Not the steps of a frightened boy. Jonas, she said. Graves nodded. That's my thought too. He paused. But the apprentice knows something Jonas doesn't want known. And that, Miss Marple said softly, is why he's terrified. She stepped back from the counter. Her mind worked through patterns. Pressure. Opportunity. Fear. Human nature. Someone had cracked first. Someone had slipped. Miss Marple lifted her head. A lie had cracked. She looked toward the shop doorway, but not the one she expected. The apprentice sat on a stool near the back wall. Head down, hands clasped, breath shaking. He looked smaller than before, as if the truth itself weighed on him. Miss Marple approached slowly. Inspector Graves stood behind her, arms crossed, expression tight. You lied, Graves said. Calm voice, firm tone. No more now. Tell us everything. The apprentice closed his eyes, took one slow breath, then another. His shoulders trembled. I'm sorry, he whispered. Miss Marple waited. Silence worked better than pressure. Silence made truth rise to the surface. The apprentice looked up. His eyes were wet, red at the corners. His voice cracked. I opened the third clock. Mini hook. Miss Marple didn't react. Graves leaned forward slightly. When? He asked. At dawn, the apprentice said. I came earlier than I told you. Much earlier. His voice dropped. I didn't want anyone to see. Why? Miss Marple asked gently. Because Mr. Crispin warned me, he whispered. He told me not to touch his special work. He said some clocks were not to be opened. Ever. His fingers tightened. But I was worried. He didn't come home. He didn't answer. The shop was half open. A quick breath. I panicked. I thought something happened to him, so I went to the shed. Miss Marple nodded. And you opened the clock? Yes. A single word. Heavy. Full of guilt. What did you find? Graves asked. The apprentice swallowed hard. Envelopes, he said. Money envelopes. 3 of them, hidden behind the inner panel. He blinked fast. I didn't know what they were for. I just knew he was hiding them. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Graves. She returned her attention to the boy. And then? The apprentice wiped his face. He always said someone from his past would return. Someone he didn't want to see again. Mini hook. He said the man brought trouble the first time. He feared the second time would be worse. Miss Marple leaned closer. Did you see anyone that night? He hesitated. Pain flickered across his face. Fear followed. He looked at the door, at the window, then back to the floor. Yes, he whispered. I saw Mr. Crispin leave. Miss Marple stilled. Leave? With whom? He shook his head quickly. No, I can't. Graves stepped forward. You saw him leave with a tall man, he said. It fits the footprints. It fits the shed. It fits the clock being moved. The apprentice hugged his arms. Yes, he whispered. He went with a tall man. I saw them walk toward the lane. Mr. Crispin didn't look back. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. And the man? Miss Marple asked. Describe him. The apprentice froze. His face drained of color. His lips pressed tight. Every part of him locked in place. I can't say his name, he whispered. I won't. He'll find out. He always does. Miss Marple's voice softened. You're safe here. But fear held him like iron. He shook his head again. Harder this time. There was one name. He closed his eyes tight. He would not speak. Inspector Graves unlocked the shed again. Miss Marple followed him inside. The third clock waited in the corner. Still ticking. Soft, steady, purposeful. Graves folded his sleeves. Miss Marple stood beside the clock. She turned the master key in the lock. Slow. Precise. The panel gave a faint click. The front swung open. Inside, the inner casing looked normal. Wood panel. Brass hinges. No money. No envelopes. No scraps. Nothing visible. Mini hook. Miss Marple pressed along the back. One section felt loose. She tapped it lightly. A dull sound. Hollow. Graves nodded. Hidden compartment. Yes, she said. She eased her fingers under the edge. Lifted. The panel slid out. Behind it sat a small brass plate. Flat, cold, tarnished around the edges. But the engraving shone clearly. A crescent mark. The same shape as the scratch on the brass key. The same curve she had noticed on the apprentice's wrist movement. The same symbol repeating through Crispin's fear. Graves stared at it. Do you recognize that? Miss Marple nodded once. Quietly, calmly. Yes, mini hook. The crescent, she said. A sign used by certain men. Years ago. Men who kept property hidden. Men who paid for secrecy. Men who never left proof. Graves frowned. Criminals? Miss Marple gave a small nod. Not petty thieves. Not pickpockets. Collectors. They stole only one type of thing. She touched the brass plate. Money owed. Graves tightened his jaw. And Crispin worked for them? Not willingly, Miss Marple said. But he was clever with clocks. Too clever. They used him to build lockboxes inside them. Hidden spaces. Exact measurements. Impossible to find unless you knew. She held up the plate, and every lockbox had a marker. This marker. Graves let out a slow breath. So Crispin's past wasn't clean. No, Miss Marple replied. But he tried to leave it behind. He refused further work. He opened a simple shop. He kept to small repairs. But the past does not forget craftsmen like him. Mini hook. And it does not forgive debts. Graves paced once across the shed. So Jonas Vale wasn't after Crispin personally. He was after the money hidden inside the clocks. Yes, Miss Marple said. And Crispin knew the moment the crescent returned, the collector wasn't far behind. Graves pointed at the brass plate. Then this confirms it. Someone came to collect. Miss Marple studied the plate again. The engraving was deep, deliberate, not decorative, not accidental. A brand, a warning, a claim of ownership. She placed the plate on the workbench. The ticking of the third clock continued behind her, slow, measured, like a countdown. Graves looked uneasy. He hid this for years. Why leave it now? Miss Marple answered softly. Because the man he feared finally returned. Crispin knew he wouldn't escape twice. She stepped back, her expression sharpened. The pattern was complete. The clue trail pointed to one truth. A crescent mark never traveled alone. It arrived with someone. Someone dangerous. Someone patient. Someone who always came back for the final debt. The crescent mark meant only one thing. Miss Marple closed the clock door. A collector had returned. Miss Marple stood beside the third clock. Inspector Graves waited near the shed door, both silent, both thinking, both feeling the last missing piece somewhere close. Miss Marple bent down. She checked the screws at the base again. 2 were old, dust packed around them, color faded, but one screw looked different. She lifted it with her fingernail. The thread held pale soil, very pale. Not from the shed, not from the shop, not from the village street. Mini hook. She rubbed it lightly between her fingers. The texture was familiar, thin, dry, powder-like. She had walked across that soil before. Brindleford Landing, only the riverbank there held soil that pale. Only that place left a powdery residue. She remembered the way it stuck to the soles of boots. Always, even after brushing. Inspector Graves stepped closer. What did you find? Miss Marple held up the screw. Soil, she said. Not from here. Graves leaned in, his eyes narrowed. That's from the landing. Yes, Miss Marple said. Which means this clock was carried there recently. Graves frowned. Carried? Why would anyone drag a heavy clock to the riverbank? Miss Marple didn't answer. Not yet. She studied the base again. The soil wasn't only on the screw. Small specks clung to the underside of the wood. Too many for a brief contact. It had been placed on the ground. Dragged a little. Shifted. Moved again. She stood. Her mind arranged everything. The missing man. The ticking clock. The soil. The footprints. The blue cloth. The hidden brass plate. The apprentice's fear. The crescent mark. A shape formed. A direction. A location. All pointing to one place. Mini hook. But one more detail held her attention. She checked the clock door. The inner lock required a second key. A small one. Distinct. Precise. It wasn't anywhere in the shed. Not on the bench. Not in the drawers. Not in Crispin's toolbox. It was missing. Miss Marple stepped back. Inspector, she said quietly. The final key is gone. Graves paused. You mean the key to open the inner chamber? Yes, Miss Marple said. Someone took it. Someone who knew what Crispin hid inside. Someone who needed to open the clock again, at the river. Graves straightened. He caught her meaning quickly. Someone dragged the clock out of here last night. Miss Marple nodded. And dragged something else with it. Graves' expression darkened. You think Crispin? Miss Marple raised a hand. Let me finish. She walked out of the shed. She looked at the alley. She looked at the yard. She looked at the direction the footprints led, the same direction as the pale soil trail, to Brindleford Landing. Her voice dropped, soft, sharp, certain. "The clock moved," she said. "The key vanished. The soil tells the rest." And the apprentice saw a tall man. Her eyes focused on the path ahead. And that man took Crispin with him. Inspector Graves stiffened. "You're saying Crispin is—" Miss Marple cut him off. "No guesses, only facts. And the facts point to the river." She turned toward the path, her steps steady, her face set, everything aligned. Everything pointed the same way. And then Miss Marple whispered the last piece. She knew exactly where Crispin was. Brindleford Landing filled with voices. Villagers gathered along the bank. Boots pressed into the pale soil. Inspector Graves stood at the front, Miss Marple beside him. Everyone waited. Crispin lay on a blanket near the steps. Cold, weak, frightened. Wrapped in a coat the constable brought. Eyes half open, breathing shallow, but alive. Miss Marple raised a hand. The crowd quieted at once. She began. "Jonas Vale returned," she said. "Calm, steady, exact. He came to collect money. Money hidden in the clocks. Money Crispin once kept for a criminal circle." Murmurs spread. Shock, worry, recognition. Miss Marple continued. "Crispin tried to leave that life. He opened a simple shop, but he carried secrets, and secrets draw old debts back." She pointed to the pale soil near the steps. "This trail tells us everything. The third clock was dragged here, not for repair, for extraction." Inspector Graves stepped in. Jonas wanted the hidden money. He looked at the villagers, but he didn't know the truth. Miss Marple nodded. Crispin refused to help him. He would not open the second clock. He would not reveal the real hiding place. Minnie Hook, and he would not return to that world. She turned toward Crispin. His eyes fluttered open. His lips moved. No sound yet. Still listening. Miss Marple continued. Jonas forced Crispin to the shed. Made him open the third clock. But Crispin had moved the real envelopes. He hid them in the second clock instead. A villager whispered. "So Jonas searched the wrong one." "Yes," Miss Marple said. "And when he didn't find what he wanted, he dragged Crispin here." Inspector Graves pointed at the edge of the water. Footprints matched the direction, drag marks as well. 2 sets, one pulling, one resisting. Miss Marple added, "Jonas thought he could frighten Crispin, force him to talk, make him reveal the true hiding place." The apprentice stepped forward slowly, eyes on Crispin, guilt rising in every breath. Miss Marple spoke gently. Crispin fought back. She nodded at the shallow slope. He broke free, stumbled down the bank, fell into the water. Inspector Graves finished the line, and Jonas fled. A gasp moved through the group. Someone asked, "Why didn't he help him?" Miss Marple answered plainly, "Collectors don't save their debts. They leave before. Witnesses arrive." The constables lifted Crispin carefully. He winced. Cold shook through him, but he was conscious now, more aware, more steady. Miss Marple knelt beside him. "Mr. Crispin," she said softly, "you hid the true money in the second clock, didn't you?" He nodded once. A trembling nod, but clear. The apprentice let out a tight breath. Tears rose. Fear released. Inspector Graves turned to the men near the steps. "Search the river path. Jonas is on foot. He can't be far." Miss Marple rose slowly. Her eyes scanned the tree line. She felt it. A presence, a tension, a watching quiet. Everyone thought it was over. It wasn't, but Jonas was still somewhere. She looked toward the dark path beyond the reeds. Close. Crispin rested in Mrs. Hargood's cottage. Fire low, room warm, tea steaming. A blanket pulled to his chin. He looked exhausted, but he looked safe. Mrs. Hargood hovered beside him, tucked the blanket again, poured tea, worried every second. She had not left his side since the landing. Miss Marple sat near the window, hands folded, eyes gentle, watching him breathe, watching him return to himself. The apprentice stood near the door, shoulders hunched, guilt heavy on his face. He didn't step closer. He didn't look at Crispin directly. Minnie Hook. At last, Crispin lifted his head, his voice thin. "Come here, lad." The apprentice stepped forward, slow, careful, ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have told you about the clock. I should have told the inspector. I should have told everyone." His hands shook. "I was afraid." Crispin nodded once, a tired nod, but a kind one. "I know," he said. "You're young. Fear gets there first." The apprentice blinked. "You forgive me?" Crispin breathed out. "Yes. One word. Firm. Final. You tried to help, even when you were frightened." Mrs. Hargood placed a fresh cup of tea in his hand. "You'll mend," she said softly. "Slowly, but you will." Crispin smiled weakly. "Tea always helps." Miss Marple leaned forward. Her tone held calm authority. "Crispin," she said, "you hid the money because you wanted a clean life, a quiet life, and you almost lost both." He nodded. Regret flickered across his eyes. "I should have destroyed it. I should have given it to the police long ago." Miss Marple shook her head gently. "People don't erase the past easily. They tuck it away, like a letter or a secret drawer." She paused. "Let the lesson settle. Some debts belong to the past," she said softly. "Unless we open them again." Crispin lowered his eyes. The apprentice looked at the floor. Mrs. Hargood sighed deeply, a sigh of release. Relief. Worry fading by inches. Inspector Graves entered quietly. Boots wiped, hat off, voice low. "He'll recover," he said. "Doctor agrees. No serious damage. Just shock, cold, and strain." Crispin nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Graves looked around the room. "All right, Jonas is still missing, but we'll find him." Silence filled the cottage. A steady, calm silence. Safe silence. The apprentice sat down at last, closer to Crispin. Still careful, still unsure, but closer. Miss Marple rose, her work for the day done. Her coat already buttoned. She looked at the group with soft approval. "You'll all rest now," she said. "No more clocks. No more secrets." Mrs. Hargood nodded strongly. "None." Crispin sank deeper into the chair, eyes closing, breath easing, finally calm. The apprentice looked relieved, almost peaceful, almost. Minnie Hook. Miss Marple turned toward the door, paused. Her eyes narrowed slightly, just slightly. A thought forming, a detail returning. Quiet, persistent. Everyone believed the story was complete. It wasn't. But one small question still lingered. "Davis," returned with a gentle breath. "Thank you for sharing this quiet mystery with me tonight." He smiled softly through the voice. "Tell me which clue stood out to you, and where are you listening from tonight? I always love hearing that." A calm pause, a warm closing. If you enjoyed this evening's story, join us again tomorrow. There's always another thread, another whisper, another secret waiting. His voice settled into a soft promise. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil. A dim window glowed faintly in the cottage wall. Inside, one antique clock rested on a small table. Its pendulum hung perfectly still. Silent now. Finished. Beside it, a single cup cooled, steam thinning into the quiet. The lane outside lay empty, calm, untouched after the day's troubles. No voices, no footsteps, only the soft stillness that follows a truth uncovered. The image lingered, held, faded gently into night. A final whisper drifted through the dark. Truth cools slower than tea, but it always cools. At dusk, a constable hurried back from the woods. In his hands, Jonas's heavy blue coat, torn, wet at the cuffs, left on a bramble hook, as if dropped in haste. Inspector Graves examined it once. No footprints nearby, no trail, no sign of Jonas anywhere. The coat was here, Jonas was not. The trees stood still. The path stayed empty. A quiet truth settled over the search. Some shadows walk away, but not far. Davis's voice returned in a soft hush. Tomorrow's mystery begins with a missing photograph and a locked attic no one has opened in years. A calm pause followed, a quiet smile in his tone. Rest well, and come back for the next secret.